Podcasting with Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's podcast. And what a special one it is for me. Episode 100. And just over 2 years has passed since I done the first episode. And some of you have followed me from the very first one. And I really appreciate it. And for those of you who have only just come across the podcast, it all started at the start of lockdown, at the bottom of the garden in my shed. We all had plenty of time to think of what we're going to do because of the restrictions and that, and we were limited on travel and just one of those things. And I thought to myself, I've got to start doing something different. Not only was my photography hit with the restrictions and no one could come to my home and for any studio shoots, so every day I'd go down the shed and have a think, get some sort of routine going, because I think it was for the first 3 weeks or so we weren't allowed to leave the house. And during this time, I thought to myself, I've been 26 plus years working for angling magazines, notably trout fishermen mostly. I could see things had changed, and all the experience I had, all the contacts I made, it'd been sad to just leave it all go, thinking it's just one of those things which you've done and move on. So I got my thinking cap on and thought of doing more or less the same thing, but in a different medium. So instead of the written word, to start a podcast. And little did I know at the time, but I heard everyone talking about podcasts. Since then, they have boomed, and there's podcasts everywhere now. There's one person I got to really thank for it all. It's a good friend of mine, Carol. She initially put the idea into my head. So, like everything I do, if I'm doing something, I want to do it right. So I invested a good bit of money actually on the recording equipment and how to learn to record and the background with podcasts. So it took me about 3 months to get it all together before it went live in July 2000. So I owe a lot to Carol. Some of you haven't met, but all of you would have heard, because even though I'm the voice behind the podcast, there's one voice at the start which I've been asked many times, who's this sexy voice? And it's Carol. And it's stuck from the start. She didn't want to do it, but with a bit of persuasion, and I'm glad she did. And without her encouragement and social media skills and background, this wouldn't have come about. But what this podcast has given me as well, it's given me the opportunity to get back in touch with some of the people and contacts I met from over the years in the fishing world. It was great to catch up with them and chat and get them as guests onto this podcast. Even though most of the people on the 99 episodes which I've spoke to, most of them I have known. But there are a few which, until this come about, I didn't know. And now they've become good friends. I hope to get them on many more times to chat with. And when I started the podcast, one thing I've tried to do, I obviously live in Wales. I fish a lot of the waters in Wales and England. A lot of the friends and guests I've chatted over the period have been from here and fished these waters like me. But as most of you know, my passion is Ireland, the west of Ireland, especially on the Corrib. Because I've got lots of friends and contacts out there, I try to keep a balance. Each month, I try to get as much Irish content as I can as well, which I thoroughly enjoy. So on to this week's episode. I wanted to put something special together, and I think the only way to do it is to have a selection, a snippets, a collection of some of my past episodes. It was quite difficult to choose which ones, to be honest with you, because with 99 episodes, and probably well in excess of over 100 hours, but I put together a few moments from the recordings, which has definitely put a smile on my face, and I had a lot of messages and emails and feedback over some of them, which I know have been really popular. So sit back and enjoy. Episode 7, Fish Artist David Miller. I see a snorkel coming up into the pool.
I do for obvious reasons avoid going at night. Definitely. I have upset over the years. I'm literally just one or two fishermen when they've turned up to fish a pool and they've seen me sort of
coming out.
Yeah. In one pool on the Cothie. What I do to relax after a dive sometimes, like you're chasing shadows really. The fish are here and then they're gone, and it's hard work. You're swimming upriver. So I've had a session photographing, and also just because it's what I love to do. Late in the season one year on the Cothie, it was a deep pool, about 10 feet deep, and I had a good dive, seen some fish. So I lay on my back on the bottom of the pool. You can just lie with your scuba gear on, watch the surface and watch the leaves coming down.
Wow.
And it is like, wow, this is amazing. So, but some guy, I couldn't see him, had arrived to fish the pool. and he sees me and he thinks I'm stuck. And he said, because I don't know how many minutes I was lying there, not moving. And the Cothie, especially when I dive, I choose it when it's really clear. And so he could see virtually every detail on me, lying on the back, not moving. And when I finally decided, he said I was just about to phone the emergency services.
39, Marco Orsi.
Started fishing a pool that's called Kevin's Croy, spinning with a black and gold flying sea, and water was coloured, perfect conditions. I caught a 6-pound grilse, quickly returned, I thought, it's a good start to the day. And a couple of casts later, I hooked a fish, and I thought, this is substantial, it's like it is irresistible force, and I thought, fish took a huge run through the pool I was fishing up onto the next pool.
Upriver.
And he hit the lip of the pool above us, and I just caught the top of his back, and I thought, oh gosh, Chunky, we need the net, because we didn't have a net. So Chunky's called Chunky because he's chunky. He's about
big lad, like.
He's a big lad, and the hut was about 400 yards away. So he ran up, and God bless him, he came back with a net. But at this time, the fish had come back, and he was in the pool. I'd hooked him, and he was rolling, and I could see the hook was just on the outside of the mouth of the and he had a huge cape, this fish.
Yeah.
It was an autumn fish, Wasn't, you've seen the pictures. If you look at it, people think it's a brown trout,
Yeah,
but
colour on it.
It's an autumn coloured fish, and, about 20, say half hour I was playing this fish, and strong current as well. He just managed to come into a backwater, and you could see the full length of the fish, and Chunky netted him for me, and I thought, just like legs, because you've caught a big fish on your own, haven't you? And you know all about this. And you just get this feeling, thinking, oh my gosh, this is something special, So we had the scales and we weighed it, and I said, let's weigh it again, This is a 35 pound plus fish. What's classed as a portmanteau fish. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term. The old way fishermen used to class anything above 30 pound as a portmanteau, and anything below that was like ladies' handbags, It was like
48, the story of my Loch Corrib Ferox record. And all of this time, your stomach is in knots with the excitement and the adrenaline, because you really don't want this fish to come off. And I did, as I said previously, I hooked the fish 2 years before, and it was a record-sized fish that, and he came off. And I'd thought to myself, I don't want to go through that again. If this fish was going to come off, I was going to just step over the side. So anyway, I played this fish, and it looked like now, it was just over the hour, she was ready for the net. So, again, if you can imagine now, you're in the boat, the fish is behind you, you're facing the wind, and you're drifting away from the fish, which is quite difficult. And then you're down in a trough and up. So I had my big net out, had it over the side, I she came to the surface on her side, and she was just come into the net. And as she came into the net, the trough, the way the wind was, blew the boat up into the crest of the wave, and the fish slipped out and then back in. You can imagine what I felt. The fish was half in the net, and she just slid back in. And at this point, I'm thinking, I was so lucky, because I could see the bait and the hooks was inside the mouth. If it had been outside on the jaws, as she slid out at the edge of the net, a good chance the hooks would have been stuck in the net, and then inevitable would happen. She would have come off. Another 10 minutes passed now. And if you can imagine, I know the size of the fish now. I've seen the size of the fish, and I still haven't got it in. So, like I said, about another 10 minutes passed now, and she came up to the surface again. I slipped my net under this time, clean as a whistle, lifted the net, and that was it. I didn't just lift her in straight away. I was so shattered, mentally as well as physically. Hour and a quarter that fish would be on. So I held the net at the end of the gunwales for 2 minutes. It seemed like a lifetime. Just looked over the side, see the fish there. Lift it then, one heave into the boat. And I could see then that this was a record. Episode 81, Peter Boyle.
We had to smut, and as I was pulling in the octopus, the kind of octopus would store them and get them kind of going, and then they'd come after the octopus and turn around and take the Cape McLaren behind it, you know. So, geez, that was grand that whoever's headed out, and I says to the guy with me, I says, listen, I know there's a few fish and I've met them. I was on the Kelly Green, I says, and was pulling wets over them and was getting them all right. So went out, and next thing I hooked into this fish, and he was a block of a trout, honest to God. And I says, pass me down the net. And your man turns around and he says, where is the net? He says, you're joking. I says, where is the net? I says, is it not in the boat? It was in the boat. I says, it was when you got in. Oh, damn it. He says, I lifted it out. He says, I put it on the boat beside you. He says, when I was lifting in me gear.
Oh, no.
I says, well, what the hell are we going to do now? And he says, right. He says, he got down on his hands and knees on the floor of the boat, and I was playing the fish, and I seen him lifting the baler. And I said, where are you going with the baler? He says, I'm going to put the fish in there. I just, Jesus, have you not seen the size of the fish? And he says, all right. He says, I think we need a bigger baler. And he says, listen, see what they can do there. So, Jesus, we got the fish, and the fish come alongside. And your man, to be fair to him, I ended up with 4 fish, and the 4 fish combined weighed 19 pounds. And he netted every single one with his hands and knees on the boat, lifting them in over the side. Oh, never seen anything like it. It was mental. Jesus, it was, and you know, God loved him. It was just the luck that was in it. But listen, many's a man wouldn't have done it, you know.
Yeah.
And us sitting without a net in the boat, you know.
Episode 2, Alan Rees. Will Shaw, which used to be the editor of Trout and Salmon.
Right, yeah.
He was telling me this one story, and he was fishing the Rydal.
Right.
And something happened, and he got spooked. He thought, I'm not staying here now. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
So he got out of the river, and he ran across the field to his car. He couldn't wait to run it, right? And as he ran across the field, he hit a cow sleeping. And you can imagine it. You're running across the field, you hit the cow. Oh, jumped more. I don't know, the cow or him.
Yeah.
And this cow got up, a big warm thing you imagine you're falling on. He said it was terrifying. And I can imagine. But, you know, the whole night experience, I suppose the stories you can draw into it, it's a whole romance. It's a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
Just being there, listening to the owls as well, and things creeping and around. And
yeah, well, some of the stuff you're talking about, owls, you know, I used to fish a small stretch of river, and there was a nice meadow next to it. And every evening I used to see 2 barn owls working that field, that meadow. And, you know, when they're in flight, they're absolutely silent. And they're only small birds, but they're really good. But, you know, you were talking about cows. I'd staked out this pool on the River Tyvee. Okay, it was above Llandyssil there, and I knew they were fishing there because I'd been down and I'd looked, you know, I'd climbed a tree and seen these fish going around.
And I sat there, maybe 2 hours before dusk, and I thought, right, I'm going to be first on this pool. And as darkness started to come in, there was like sort of a high bank opposite, and I was sat there waiting. And I heard some branches starting to crackle, and I was like, someone's going to come down the bank there and jump in the pool ahead of me. I'm not going to have that. And I waited, and these crackles and branches started getting a bit more and more. And more. All of a sudden, there was a massive crack. And I found out later, it was a fence post had broken. There happened to be a cow scratching its back against the fence. But when the fence post broke, the cow came tumbling down through the trees. Right, yeah, down through the trees, off the bank, into the pool. And this cow was swimming in this pool going, moo, moo. Right? I wasn't happy, I tell you.
46, Paul Slaney. You're saying about dollies like the hippos and the crocs. You had a close escape falling off a boat in
Yeah, you want to ask my wife now when we finish this. Yeah, we went. I went on a bone fishing trip, and my wife came with me. One and only time she ever come fishing with me. And anyway, we'd done some bone fishing. It was the end of the day, and we were just messing about. So we thought we'd try some sharks, shark fishing. So we caught a barracuda, and cut it up to chum the sharks in. That's what we did. So now we're on a 19-foot skiff. There's me, my wife, and the guide, Colin. Little guy. He's only about, he was less than 5 foot tall, stocky, powerful boy, but he wasn't the biggest lad you've ever met. So by now the boat is surrounded by sharks. So they're like white tips, not huge, but big enough, And the way of fishing for him was to 10-0 hook on a heavy spinning rod with a chunk of barracuda on it. Literally take the bail arm off, choose which shark you wanted to catch, really, and throw, the lump of bait at it like a cricket ball, and then put the bail arm on and hope he took it.
Which you literally throw one cast,
literally you couldn't, because it's such a big lump of stuff,
Yeah.
Just throw it at it. Anyway, so I did this shark just turned and took it, tightened onto it, and got this shark on the end, and the rod's bending, and I was stood on the casting deck of a bonefish skiff. And I took one step backwards to tighten into the fish, and there was no deck left. I just went straight in the water.
Jeez, that would have been a great video clip.
Oh, Christ, man! I can remember I can remember going in, and bear in mind this little boat is literally surrounded by him, and it was shallow. I felt my feet hit the bottom, so it was maybe a little bit deeper than me. I remember thinking, this is it, and pushed back up. And as I pushed back up, my head came out the water. Colin was there. Grabbed me by the shoulders and literally manhandled me back on the boat. I swear my fags were still dry. I was in and out so fast, And my wife was like, it was one of them, time to go home sort of thing.
Episode 6, Ceri Thomas.
Discovered there was a lake up near the Tivy Pools called Llyn Gynnon.
I've heard of
You
it.
can fish as part of the Ryder Angling Club. And what we used to do is we used to love it because you would always be guaranteed to catch a lot of fish there. It was a good head of fish, and the average size was like 3/4 of a pound to a pound. So we went up there. We fished the Tivy Pools right one evening, and thought, should we walk over to the Gynnon? Nice night for it, middle of the summer. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go there for the evening rise, innit? So it was about a 2-mile walk there. So we got there. And it was great. He fished his head off, and we were completely engrossed with the fishing. And it was like about 9 o'clock now.
Yeah.
Middle of July, Great, let's go back. And we looked around, and this thick mist, right, fog, was rolling in off the moor behind us, right? And this stuff now, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. What the hell do we do now? So we know the direction. We'll try and head back to the car. We sort of tried to cut across the moor, and it's kind of it's very boggy up there. And
I know, it's quite open, isn't it?
Tussock grass and all this stuff, and we thought we were going in the right direction, so we were just walking and walking. It seemed like hours, and it was now about midnight, and bloody couldn't see a thing. If we see the stars, you could have made out the moonlight, some of the mountains,
Good romantic, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was like. what did we do? Well, we sort of had to find a rock. It was a great big rock with like a little cave underneath this. So we had to wedge ourselves under that. And it was drizzle as well now, so we were soaking wet. And I believe there was a sheep or two in there as well to keep us company.
So you got a cut with the sheep as well?
Cut with the sheep, yeah, and under a rock, yeah. So we spent the night up there.
Did you? Spent the night up there?
Spent the night, yeah, we were stuck. And so it was about 7 a.m. now. It was a bit of light now, and it was still just as bad.
Were you expected back somewhere at a certain time?
We probably were, but we never really used to tell our parents. We would say, "Oh yeah, we're going fishing," and we disappear for a few days. Like it was a bit different back then, wasn't it? But yeah, so it was nearly as bad, and we were still lost, and there was no sign of this stuff clearing. So I walked away from the cave. I was desperate for a pee, right? And I came across a tarmacked road. And I was like, "What the hell?" I was like, "There's a road here." And we walked over, and it turns out this was the road by the side of Llyn Egnant. And we were about 200 yards from our car.
No.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So we nearly got there.
Yeah.
But
well, at least you got the sheep experience as well.
The sheep experience as well, yeah, in Wales. Like,
200 yards.
Yeah.
From the car.
Yeah.
18, Colin Follen.
I'm not going to talk about famous people because they're no different than you or I. But you'd get a lot of politicians, actors, musicians, the whole spectrum of them. None of them really leave an impression on me, anyway. To be honest with you, but I tell you one about. No, I don't know. I suppose he's famous, but I called him a feckin' Egypt anyway, and. Here's what happened was I was gillying on Ballynahinch for the first week in July for a fella called Don Carroll. He was Carroll's cigarette. I was Don's gilly, and always the first 7 days in July was year on, year off. That was always with Don. And sometimes he'd have a guest with him for the week. And this time he had a guest, a fella from Belgium, an outlet from Belgium. So anyway, well, 3 days into the fishing, we were fishing Beat 1 in Ballynahinch, and we were fishing on the far bank, and on the near bank there's all rushes and reeds, and he hooked a fish about 5 or 6 pound, and the fish kept, trying to run into the rushes on him, and I kept saying to him, I said, don't let him in there. I said, pull him out, and he wasn't stopping the fish at all, and
was it a trout?
The fish went. No, it was a grilled salmon.
Yeah.
The fish went straight into the reeds anyway. I says, "You fucking idiot!" I says, "I told you not to let him into the reeds." And sure, the fly, we lost the fly as well, which kind of really annoyed me because I only had the one of it and it was working very well that week. So I had to snap the line anyway and got it back. So I finished up with him on the Friday, and I knew they were going to dinner in Roundstone, into O'Dowd's restaurant in Roundstone. You were actually in there with me one time, weren't you?
I remember, yeah.
Chowder.
You had a liquid lunch as well, I think.
Liquid lunch. Do you see how I stopped? We had chowder and... so what happened was I drove back to Galway after doing 7 days work with them, and I was emptying out my car, and lo and behold, Yamano's fishing bag was in the boot of my car, the Belgian fella.
Yeah.
Like, you want to see all the hardy reels he had and boxes of fully dressed salmon flies and this, that and the other. Like, this was 50 grand worth of stuff now in his bag, like a big bag. So I said to myself, I can't be responsible for shipping this back to Belgium. Like, I hardly even knew his name and stuff. So
you'd forgot it.
Jumped back forgot it. Yeah, it was in my car. I jumped back in the car anyway, and I drove back out to Roundstone, which is about an hour and a half from Galway. And I went into the restaurant, and I brought in the bag, and there he was with Don. And there was 2 other fellas, 2 kind of big heavies. And I said to myself, right, this makes sense now, because I had seen them 2 big fellas, daily for the last week and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They were his bodyguards, right? So Don says to me, you'll stay for dinner and you can stay in my house. That's brilliant, gesture what you're after doing there. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'll enjoy that. And he says, no, he says, Colin, I'll formally introduce you to the King of Belgium. He says, right, Albert, the King of Belgium. And I went, oh, hello. How do I refer to you? I says to him, and he says, well, most people will call me Your Majesty. He says, but I loved it when you called me a feckin' Egypt. So I'm not used to being called a feckin' Egypt, he says. Right, so I says, I've just called the King of Belgium a feckin' Egypt. So that was good.
51. Illtyd Griffiths.
Sea trout at sea will, if they're eating sprats, say, they will corral the sprats. The whole pile of these sea trout will corral the sprats, and they will dive in there, stun them, very much like fry feeders, trout fry feeders, and then they'll come round and they'll eat them. And they become sated. They can't eat any more. Their stomachs are absolutely full. And then they will literally sit on the bottom. Again, we don't say the bottom, but they go down in the water and they do no activity. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 10-pound fish or a 3-pound fish. Their stomach juices, their digestive juices will work pretty well at the same rate. So when they're hungry or they need feeding again, they're going to all need feeding at the same time. Yep. And then they go through this exercise again of corralling the fish, stunning them, eating as much as they can, which is why we have this phenomenal growth rate in some of these fish, right? Why do you get 16, 18, 20-pound sea trout? They're big fish. They're not going to grow to that sort of size any more than the big trout in the college will grow to that size if they're going to eat flies or eat small things. They've got to eat something substantial to maintain or to gain that weight and maintain it. So is it a matter, therefore, that when these fish are sitting in pools, that suddenly that urge to do something comes to them all at the same time? Right? Comes to them all. So if one takes, another one's going to take, another one's going to take, right? For a short period of time, a short period of activity. And I've seen me catch 3 fish in half an hour on a night when I caught nothing else, and I've been out all night. It all happened maybe between 1 and 1:30 or 2 and 2:30, whatever, right? Yeah. Suddenly, boom, boom, boom. And then nothing again. So, fishing pools is a game of patience.
Episode 56, Simon Kidd of Snowby.
You got into rivers then, did you?
I did, yeah. I learned to cast properly, and I didn't, not properly, but I learned to fish with my dad's old all-cock rod, an old reel, and a silk line, which I used to cast for hours outside in the garden sort of thing, or on the field outside their farmhouse, struggling to cast. And the harder I tried, the worse I got. But I was very keen to.
You still got it?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I would never
keep something like that.
Yeah, I would never get rid of that. Yeah, I've still got the line as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I learnt on that, and a millwood reel it was called, a millwood, an old reel. But yeah, and there wasn't much stillwater fishing to be had, but there were some rivers. I learned on the River Tean at Fingalbridge, small trout, lots of trout, and quickly learned to catch them. I used to go rock hopping. I didn't have any waders, so I'd hop between the rocks, catch the fish, and I loved it. It was all dry fly. My headmaster at my primary school in Cheriton Bishop, he was a mad keen fisherman. He used to make his own rods and stuff like that as well. And he gave me a couple of flies, and he showed me how to tie them along with my dad. And Jack Hargreaves, do you remember him?
Yeah.
Out of Town, I think it's called. Yeah. I met him once, and with his son, with my dad. And my dad knew him, and because he was from Dorset or Hampshire area somewhere, and my dad knew him and introduced me to him, and I met his son, and his son showed me how to tie my first fly.
Wow.
So I learned how to fly tie from then on. So.
And
then I got into it.
You can watch it on YouTube now. You can see.
Can you?
Yeah, I watched them on YouTube because I remember back then when he was on the TV, and it was the second half I was always interested in, Because the first half was something else to do with the country,
Yeah.
maybe shooting or whatever.
Yeah.
The second half was always fishing. I just couldn't wait to the second
The
half.
second
yeah. Yeah. And I watched him the other day now, and he's there with his pipe.
Yeah.
You know, he's a character, like, isn't he?
Episode 10, Charles Jardine.
Place I really would love to go back to. I'd like to be sandwiched between the Madison Valley and Box Canyon, because then I could spend an afternoon or a morning on the Madison and then finish it off on Henry's Fort. And that's really where I'd love to be, because of no place I've ever fished has anything like Henry's Fort when it's in her majestic best, being able to fill the senses like that river. I mean, it is just the most beautiful place to be. A sort of whispering dry grass of late autumn. You've got sandhill cranes going back south down to Mexico to overwinter. You've got the first vestiges of snow across the Tetons in the background, and you know what? And you've got trout sipping tiny western blue-winged olives or sulphurs. Oh man, it's like sometimes, Kerry, it's like fishing for ghosts.
45, James Barry.
Good fish in the morning. We got up at silly o'clock, 4 a.m. I think, and
Yeah.
we headed out. There was actually a funny story behind it. The engine wouldn't start on the boat, so you obviously get down to your boat. You're ready to go. You're looking out on the lake, and we go to pull the engine. No go out of the engine. So I was just annoyed over the top of the boat, and my friend that was with me, Jason, said, "Oh look, I'll just row us over to this bay, and we'll give it a go." And at this stage, I was sitting up top. I was just annoyed, the engine not working.
Yeah.
Ready to go back to the B&B and just say, "That's it, enough of this." But Jason, thankfully, anyway, rowed us over to the little bay, and as we were approaching, or probably 100 yards out, we could just see. Well, I could see. I was sitting up the top. We could see this fish just sipping behind an island. And I shouted back to Jason, "Yeah, I think I see something here."
Yeah.
And sure enough, we kind of rowed up onto this island, really nice and stealthy. Actually, now that I look back at it, it probably helped us a bit that the engine didn't start.
Yeah.
And it's just sipping away. And I just set up the fly, waited for the fish to come up. Textbook stuff, just drop the fly beside where he came up. And sure enough, he just came up and had it. And then all hell broke loose. It was just almighty battle, and he was just such a pretty fish.
Wow.
And yeah, definitely one I won't forget in a while. Just great buzz. Just food for the fly fishing soul up there around Mayfly time. It's great fun.
Yeah. Well, it must have been a blessing, really, that the engine didn't work.
That's it, everything, all these things happen for a reason, as they say. Yeah.
Did you get it to work after?
I was messaging Jason saying that all I need is a bit of sunshine on the engine there. Will heat it up a bit. And sure enough, when the sun came up and hit it, it was fine. One turn of the engine had started, and we headed off then, but we actually didn't catch that for the rest of the morning.
Episode 40, Fly Fishing and Fly Tying Magazine editor, Mark Bowler.
So he went up there, and I said to Glenn, if you get some shots of David there, you'll get the mountain in the background and David fishing. And as he was doing it, I noticed some little fish dimpling in this bay, where Glyn was. So I said to Glyn, I said, look, there's some little fish dimpling here, Glyn. I'll flip out, and if you set your camera up, I reckon I'll be able to cast towards the camera, and hopefully I'll get one, and then there'll be a splash in front of the camera, and I'll be in the background
with the mountain.
Yeah. So I said, so I got flipped out, and he set his camera up on the tripod, and I said, I cast out towards him, and he said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you ready?" "Yeah." I'll start retrieving. I just made about 2 or 3 retrieves, and this almighty gleam just rolled over the wet flights,
Wow.
And I thought, what on earth is that? And I lifted into it, and I remember David said, "Have you go on, Bowler?" I said, yeah, I have. And he said, "Make it jump for the camera." And I said, "David," I said, "you haven't seen this fish." I said, "It is so big it won't get off the ground.
Really?
It was, I tell you, there's a fish farm on the loch, and it grew rainbows, and sometimes they'd escape.
Oh.
But this one must have escaped a long time ago, because we eventually got it in. It was £19 1 ounce.
You're kidding.
And it was a massive rainbow, absolutely massive rainbow, and it was so funny. I thought this will get off in a minute, it's got to, but it didn't. And I caught it on a size 12 in Pearly and Victor. I caught it on
58. Emily Lewis.
By doing fishing just with one fly, one small little black lead head. And the secret was to change them. I'd fish with that for half an hour, catch 2 or 3, and then change it to white. And then fish with that for a couple of fish, and then change it to orange. And then come back to black. And that's the way I did it on the first day, because at nearly 12 o'clock, I didn't have a fish on the first day. And I think it was finishing at 4 o'clock or 4:30. But by 4:30, I had 21 fish. And I'd done it on that process of changing, listening to him and listening
used to the fly.
And I remember coming the second day. Jeremy was about, I think he had about 14 on the first day, and he was a good angler. And I remember he knew where I was going to fish again the next day, and he came opposite me on the other side of the arm to fish with me. And I could see him fishing, and I don't think that was good news, because I could see him catching fish, and he had the shooting head he had.
Yeah.
And he used to go miles out with a shooting head. I can see him now fishing, and he was casting towards me, and suddenly I looked up in the air, and I could see this shooting head, this line coming through the air towards me. And what had happened, it had broken loose from the backing, and the shooting led him. And I was very happy in my mind, mind you. He slowed him down a bit, because he'd caught quite a number of fish. Well, I hadn't had only one, I think. So I said, well, the best thing for you to do, Lewis, I said, was to move. Don't look at it, Jeremy. Let him tie another shooting head and go somewhere else. And that's what I did. I went to somewhere else, and I was fortunate enough to catch another 9 or 10 fish. And that was enough for me to carry the day.
59. Russell Owen.
Bowls of soup and something in the lodge.
Yeah, it's quite posh, isn't it?
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we come off the boat without packed lunches and stuff.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, we did when we went into the...
We just sat down.
Tinner Cornell.
And then I started eating my food. And I could see the chef across the far side of the room. If it looks good, kill. He's staring at me. And I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about it. I think I did the bowl of soup, and you said, I'm okay, I've got some sandwiches. But they didn't like that much, did they? Strange, I don't know really why that is, yeah. Yeah, but I think that you had a bowl of soup after as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I felt guilty then.
Yeah.
I laughed then, because when we went back and he said...
Phil
Wood was there
running
after,
the fishing
and he said he actually came up to me and he said that the chef wasn't too happy. What made me laugh then, he said, you're lucky you didn't have a kebab.
Yeah. After practice, and we sort of established that there was a lot of fish in that dam basin area, but it was very windy. Now, people have been catching and pulling on previous days and practice days, but come match day, it really did blow up, and to an extent where it borderline whether we should have even been on the water. The safety boat was sat on the down wall, making sure everyone was okay all day. But we found that floaters were the best, because we had a couple of fabs and a couple of nymphs, but the floater we thought was the best because the surface tension tends to move faster than the boat in a big swell, because you've got the drogue out, whereas the surface water is moving fast. Yeah. And a floating line sits in the surface tension, so it was staying tight, so you could fish almost static or very slow. Nice. And your floater stays tight the whole time. Yeah. Your flies might sink a little bit, but you're not constantly trying to catch your flies up where you would be.
Because the drogue will slow you down so much.
Yeah, with a tip line or a sinking line, you're going to have to be retrieving your flies quite fast just to stay in contact. Where a floater, you just let the surface tension do the work, so you almost got a tight line. I know your flies are sinking a little bit, so you get a little bit of a hinge effect.
Will they be fished outside the cages? No, you'll see them. I can see a smile on your face.
Yeah, there is, yeah. We've got pets by the jetty, but these are a different calibre down here. Yeah, there's fish that hang about under the nets. But this is where they live.
So these fish now are actually out
Yeah, these are
in the lake.
Yeah, these
But
fish
this
live outside the nets. Yeah.
Nothing holding them here. Look at that, look at that. You must have it going in.
Nice brownie. That's a double. That's a double, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Massive, isn't
I
it?
think that's in the lake.
Massive. That's nothing to watch it.
91. Terry Bromwell.
Talk about good fish. There's one fish I want to talk to you about now. And this is what brought you some fame now, hasn't it? You're a pin-up guy, aren't you?
I'm a tough pin-up boy.
Tell me what happened then. Tell me the story with this big fish you had up in the Don, isn't it?
Yeah, River Don in Scotland in the International. It was my first peg, C3, and I was under a bridge and the weather was boiling and the river was really low and all the ranunculus beds, you could see the weed all through the river.
It's a big river?
Yes, massive.
It's nothing like a...
Oh no, this is a brook compared to the Don. It's wide and it looks like you can wade there, but you get up above your knees and they'll take you off your feet. And for us, the spiders were working well, so we were using them above the French leader. We used them on the French leader, but putting the spiders in the droppers. And in amongst the weed, we had like 20, 25 inches apart from the nymph to a spider, and like shaking the tip through the weed beds, and we were getting measures. So again, the spider to flicker, because it was purling there, it was flashing, and it seemed to get the fish. And we'd done that in practice. We'd done a little bit of it in practice. We were catching fish, so we stopped doing that and find something else. So if we fall back on, and that's what I set up. I set a French leader up with a 3.5 mil on the point, and a size 14 black pearly spider.
There's 2 flies?
Yeah, 2 flies, yeah. And I was fishing the inside seam first, and I caught 2 fish pretty quickly. And then I come from there then because I didn't want to overfish it just in the second session because it was tough fishing, it wasn't easy. And I left it for a little bit, looked for another fish. It was nothing really going, so I come back. And where the pool would drop in, and you had about 3 foot of water in the end of the pool, there's like a washout, and it was like really thick ranunculus, just thick lines, and there was like little channels, and I seen this one channel, and it just looked like it stopped. So I thought, I'll chuck the bugs in there and just shake a tip. I chucked the bugs in, I turned the rod to the side, I was bringing it through just a little bit faster than the current, and I was just shaking the tip. But I fished a French leader. I had a 15-metre Daiku leader, so I was pretty far away, so I weren't disturbing the fish in the weed. And it stopped, but I felt it through the rod. It thump. You know, sometimes you have a salmon and then you feel him on worms or whatever. You thump. It just thudded, and I struck. And as I struck and I draw the line just come towards me slow, just come straight at me. And my controller was behind me. I went, oh no. And he was like, what's the matter? As I was saying, what's the matter? The line went slack in my hand and the fish was just above my head, just completely, just water spray everywhere. And this trout was just flicking through the air. And I was like, I went, that's a brownie. And I was expecting a sea trout because we were catching sea trout up, and some of the boys hooked some big fish we never got to see, and we thought they were big sea trout. And but as it turned in the air and flicked and the water spray, and it was like slow motion in my head. And I was like, this is a fish, this is insane. So I dropped the rod, and then it just went crazy, and it just, the power.
What leader you had on?
I had the Anak 3.5 fluorocarbon on. Yeah, it was nothing.
On the dropper as well?
On the dropper, yeah. At
that
that time,
which one did you take?
He took the dropper of the spider, but I didn't know it took the dropper until I got a little bit closer. I was like,
you with a weed bed next to it.
Yeah, there was just thick. It was like a chalk stream, thick, like beds and beds and beds of weed. And he like kind of tail flicked out again. I dropped the rod, and then he went under the weed, and I was like, I'm going to lose this fish. But I thought, right, okay, the best thing I can do is keep the nymphs away from the weed. I shoved the tip of the rod in the water, I had the handle like he was holding a dagger. And I pressed the rod, the tip right into the riverbed, and I bent it down. And I put the line through my little finger, and I thought, he's under the weed, he's safe. He thinks he's safe.
Oh, I see. You wanted him under.
Yeah, so I wanted to keep all the gear right down the riverbed, because the weed is... And because it was like thick weed coming out. It was like rafts. So under there, it was clear. So in my head, thinking quickly, I was like, get him clear of it all. So what I started doing, he started to slow up, and I thought, he thinks he's safe under there. He weren't too bothered. So I was inching in him at the time. It felt like it was forever, but it was seconds. So I kept on just pulling the line inch by inch, until I got him out. And I kind of and as soon as he seen me, out he come, whoosh. Jumped again. Jumped 4 times he did. And my controller was like, I can't do anything with it.
Your net is not good, that's it.
Lucky I had my Snowbie net, my big net. And it had got an extendable handle on it. It would have been a nightmare if I didn't have that. Lucky I like a big net because it can quickly. And so I was like, kept on turning him. And then the one time I turned him and he come out from a weed, I seen him flare his gills. I went, this fish is knackered. He's stumbling. I was like, I got you. And I was like pulling the line. I turned the rod. He come down the side of the weed on me. As he was turning, I seen him, his gills go again. I thought, right, take him down into the shallow water, so he was on top of the little weed and amongst the stones. And I seen him flounder, and then I turned him, I brought him in, and I managed to dive forward and scoop him. As soon as I scooped the fish, I looked in the net, and I just looked in, and I just looked up. I went, oh my God, I said, thank you. I did, and I picked it up, and it was like, in my Snowbie net, it was coming out, it was up like this. There's a picture on Facebook of the fish. And my net now has got a bend in it.
Oh, I'd keep it like that.
That's what I've left it. It's bent where I held it. Yeah, so I kept him in the water, brought him over, and the head controller was there, and he said, it's the biggest trout I've ever seen, he said. And the controller was like, how the hell did you get that? How do you land that fish? I said, I have no idea. And we took the pictures, and I was still in my session, and I was like, right. We measured it. It was too big for the trough, so I got measurements on my rod. So he put the fish in the trough, and it was out about an inch and a half out of the trough. So he used the measurement of the rod, and the controller and another guy verified it. The two of them took photos, and he said it was 73.3 centimetres.
Wow.
And I was looking at it. I put him in the water, and I spent about 5 minutes with the fish. I was making sure he was all right. I was like, and then he was like, he took a little bit of time, but then I was just standing there, and the head controller come down, and he's like, yeah, he's all right, and he was right by the side of me, and he just started to kick, and I watched him go out to the pool, around, and he went down river and turned and sat in the pocket, and then you just seen him go away.
Wow.
I took the fly off, and I threw it into the river, and I said, thank you very much. I took the fly off, I caught it on, and I sacrificed it to the fish gods. I said, thank you very much.
69, Julie McGeever.
Story of the Archbishop and the drunken gilly.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing was, I'd never been out fishing. I'd never been on the lakes. And I mean, I was busy getting started with, at the hotel and running a hotel. And then one night he said to me after dinner, he, very quiet man over dinner, and he said, I think it'd be a very good idea, Julie, if you came out on the lake to know what your guests are doing. So Julie took off the next day, went into a renowned angling shop in Ballina, and got fitted for new big PVC waders, and I must have got a rod and all that as well. So off we went, and he used to employ for the whole month, over the weeks he was there, 2 particularly well-known gillies. They were brothers. Yeah. But there was one thing that they were well-known for also. They were seldom sober. And, it's something you don't ever happen now, but it was, 30-odd years ago, yeah. But I always think that whoever was in the best part of sobriety on the day went out with the good bishop on the day. So we went out anyway, and I'd say probably after the first or second cast, the fly came straight back and caught me in the knee. I'll always remember the knee of the waders. And the gilly spent his afternoon on his knees in front of me trying to take out the fly out of my waders. And I can actually still remember the fumes of that stale alcohol space. But the bishop is sitting up there in the bow of the boat with a curly pipe, and he used to wear a tweed cap, the Irish tweed caps always on him. But he always had the collar underneath his jacket, believe it or not, and he's giggling away.
Episode 12, Dennis Ispista of Wild Fish, Wild Places.
Flew into this, in Alaska, that's part of the deal. We fly into a remote area, get dropped off by the float plane. He makes a loop over it in the air and says, you need to walk along here and drop off into this hole, and that's the river, and I'll pick you up in 10 hours. Okay.
Wow.
So it got bear spray on us, and, I don't have a gun, but I should. And, yeah, we got charged. It was like a teenager bear, male bear, charging us. He got to about 10 feet, 12 feet, coming at us, and I sprayed the bear spray, and what happened was I got Drew in the face and myself in the face, and
missed the bear.
Stopped. Yeah, I missed the bear. It's a pretty funny story, hindsight, but yeah, it's a fog. If you've ever sprayed bear spray, which most people haven't, it's a fog. And I mean, if I was going to make bear spray, it'd be like wasp spray. It would spray 20 or 30 feet out there in a stream, like a rocket. This shit was a fog. I was like, what is this crap? Just this big fog came back in our faces, and we were screaming.
Was it a black bear, was it?
No, it was a grizzly, yeah.
A grizzly?
Bears.
Wow.
And it was scary at the time. Funny story, hindsight. We were full of bear spray and coughing and dying, and we hit the bear with a couple rocks, and we got a couple, ended up getting like 20 yards this episode.
24, Stephen Gale. Do you remember? Because they had their own boat, and there was a slipway, and they had a highest van. I think one of the boys then, he had the highest van with a boat trailer, and he reversed into the slipway, stepped out. Colin then was rowing the boat to put onto the trailer to take the boat out. And when the boat got on the trailer, it was obviously more weight, and there wasn't enough tension on the handbrake, and the whole boat, the trailer, and half the van just sunk into the... And then everyone was flapping around. The fucking van. And then everyone just watching. And then I darted over to look for the handbrake, and I couldn't find it. And then I seen you just dive in through the window of the passenger. The handbrake was on the dash. Yeah. Remember, you had to pull the handbrake from the dash. And we stopped it from going totally submerged.
It was still all right. It worked after.
I know. That's Toyota. Highest wheel there.
I don't see.
Bulletproof. And I had my XR4i then. And I towed the van out then. Luckily, I had a tow bar in it as well.
Biggest fright I ever had with that XR4. And it wasn't the one where you were racing back from Blagdon or Chew or wherever we'd been. It was when your father was driving it from North Wales. Do you remember? And we come under the bridge. And I don't know, we both woke up because we were both sleeping. Your father was driving. And we went, stop! Because he was heading straight for the roundabout. He must have been going about 90 miles an hour.
Was it? I don't remember that.
You must remember it, Ceri.
I think with shocks like that, you put it
in the back.
75, Gareth Gaza Dixon.
So if you were to pick for Clywedog then, your top flies, your go-to flies, what would it be? Or not necessarily Clywedog, even with your competition scene. I guess it's the same flies.
Well, you see, Rutland is a bit different. You're using more of the fabs down there and the leggy Nemos and stuff like that, nymphs. Whereas here it'd be more cormorants, diaos, booby. Not very rare to use a fab here. It's more at size 12 booby here for myself, isn't it? When it goes a bit harder. And when the wind's up, it's a full-on size 10. But you're still going down that tip line, slow approach when the fish goes harder. I still see it.
So when fish goes harder, you don't necessarily change the flies, you change the speed.
Yeah, or you go a little bit smaller, but that's why the bung does so well,
because it allows people to fish slow. The people that can't fish slow, they're watching that bung, and they are fishing slow, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's
as regards your lines, I bet between you and Russell, you probably got more lines than Glasgow angling. If you want to stick to your top 3 lines, which you had to have,
dive 5 sweep for pulling. That is the best line to find fish. Dive 5 sweep is one of the best pulling lines. You go to a new lake and they're on a pull, well, you can find them, can you? Because it's coming all the way through the layers. Summer fishing, when it goes hard, is a booby basher. It's got to be a booby basher because it's the fastest sinking line out there. And you look at some of the leagues in the summer, you catch 30, 40 fish in it because you can get down to them. And it does my head in a bit. People go, oh, floating line. Is catching a fish in a floating line as skillful as catching a fish 30 foot deep? I think when the fish go deeper, it's more skill, it's more fin.
It's more physical as well.
Yeah, and getting them flies into that right zone and painting that picture in your head that you're in that zone of fish.
Yeah.
And obviously for nymphing and stuff like that, the 12-foot slow tip, that is the one I use 90% of the time for slow fishing, nymphs, fabs.
A 12-foot slow tip?
12-foot slow tip, yeah. Yeah, and of course you got to have your dries, haven't you?
Yeah.
You got to have your floater for the dries.
It was quite an eye-opener actually when I was on the nets last time I was in, to see them they're in the lake, more or less. Like there's nothing to.
The amount of people you take down there and go, have a look at these, and they could stay there all day watching them. Where can you see a 15, 16 pound fish just swimming around in the lake?
Yeah, and in that condition.
Yeah.
Well, it comes to the time now. I ask the same question to everyone, and I probably think I know what the answer's going to be. Where would you want to be to make your last cast?
Well, there's only one place, isn't there? You'll be sat up here, up the Llwyd, with Dice 7 and a booby.
I thought there was going to be some romance there.
No, it's going to be, there's been romance in the Llwyd, but not like
that. Well, many thanks, Gar.
Oh, thank you.
Perhaps next time when it's a bit warmer, I'll have another day. We'll have a day out together.
Yeah, we'll have a day's fishing, but we'll wait for the heaters to come on and...
Yeah, absolutely.
Episode 23, Jamie Miller from Garnfrood Fly Fishery.
The thousands of fishermen, the thousands of days of enjoyment the fishermen have got from that lake, Yeah, it's something to be very proud of. Particularly, seeing the stress that was involved in digging that lake out.
It's a very rich lake as well. I've been to hundreds of fisheries, and I haven't fished anywhere where there's such prolific fly hatches and consistent, even in the coldest days. You're going to get fish rise.
That's down to the spring. I mean, it's a constant 11 degrees coming from the ground. It has a significance on the growth of the fish as well. The stress levels of the fish, is very good. They don't experience very warm water in the summer, and then again in the winter, they continue to feed. Some fisheries that are extracting water from mountain streams. Generally speaking, 2-3 months of the winter, the fish don't grow. The water temperature is too cold.
Yeah.
The benefit we've got at Garnfrood, although it would be nice to have more water, the water we do have is consistent temperature. And that does a significance on the insect life in the lake, the freshwater shrimp, the nymphs, and the larvae, and it does have a significance on the quality of the fish that we can rear as well at Garnfrood.
I remember the early days when I came. You had to row. There was a boat. Well, I don't think it was an oar actually. There was a boat and a rope, wasn't it? Going to the island to get to the island.
It would have been oars. I mean, how we managed to that was
health and safety. No,
you wouldn't. Health and safety wouldn't have that. No. But yes, absolutely. Before the bridge was built across the lake, that was in '97. We put the bridge in. Yeah, I used to row across. It used to be quite hilarious on a windy day. See them setting off, and you basically knew they weren't going to get to the island. They'd get to the meadow, but they wouldn't get to the island.
Yeah. I don't remember. You had chicken wire on the pontoons then, but you're gone. It's almost like Champions League now. You've got these AstroTurf, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I had an epiphany one day. AstroTurf. Why can't I use AstroTurf? And I went down to B&Q and started buying shed loads of it. It's a lot easier to do it online these days, but
Yeah, 2012, I think it was beginning of 2013 that I started sticking the AstroTurf down, and that's fantastic. It's a lot easier for fishermen to kneel down on the platforms while they're releasing fish. It's a lot kinder to the fishermen, and it's a lot kinder to your nets as well, and the fish as well, if you get a deeply hooked fish.
Episode 67, Dominic Kerrigan.
I was partnered with John Somerville. I know you mentioned John in one of the other podcasts. I was partnered with John, and Noel Moran was boating, and there was a nice wind on the lake. It was a real nice wind, and I think it was blowing into Cahir. And we went down, and Noel is a lovely wooden boat, a clinker boat, and it does drift. It does drift like a dream. There's no doubt about it. It drifts like a dream.
Yeah.
So we went in, and we were fishing off, not deep water, but fishing off marginally deep water into shallows, and came into a small inlet at Cahir Bay, and I put the fly in. I was pulling away and chatting, and the next thing just came up on the hang, and this lad just came out of the water, and the lovely head and tail over the bob fly. I just took it and let him down. Like the thing about that water was that clear. You could see the fish going down and down at the fly, and just lifted into him. And the fight took off, and I was playing away at him. And of course, then John was fishing the other side of the boat. He was fishing away, and my fish was steaming out the front of the boat here, and John was pulling away. And the next thing, I just looked with the corner of my eye, and of course, there was obviously two fish lying in there. The comrade came up and went for John's fly over, a big head and tail over it, and missed it. So that was the two fish were sitting in there. It must have been a pair of fish.
Wow.
They were hanging about in there. So John fished for a little bit, didn't get it. So fair play, he quit fishing when he seen that I was in a pretty good fish. He quit fishing. Noel got on the oars, but between the three of us, we got all done and got him directed round the rocks and into the net. And then that was I won the heat that day. I can't even remember what the prize was for winning the heat. So then, of course, that carries on then for the heaviest fish for the whole of the competition. That was maybe the Wednesday, was my qualifying day. The Saturday then, it blew up, blew really, really hard. So the qualifying days then were cancelled. Or maybe it was the final was cancelled and it had to be rescheduled. So you were sort of checking every day, and the sweat was on because you were the heaviest fish, and you were phoning, was there anything big got today? Was there anything big got today? But yeah, came out of that in the end. So I think I had Crystal trophy and €1,000 plus whatever the winning of the heat got me. I can't remember that. Yeah, so there's. Look, the thing is, it leaves you can fish competition free for a bit. Then, so you can, you're not paying anything. It's profited at that stage, which is good.
Will your wife be listening to this podcast? Because then you tell her it was £250 you're at.
that's what I told her. I said, that's £250, so she'll be out it in diesel.
Episode 32, Professional Fly Tyer, Jimmy Terrell. Well, I've enjoyed our chat. But it's come to that time, I'm going to ask you a question, which I ask everyone. And you probably know what the question is going to be. Where would you want to be to make your last cast?
On the River Gower, it's paradise. And if you're ever over here, I'll take you and you'll see why. It's a small river, and if you were out there on a summer's evening, you were in a different world. Because there's virtually nothing, only a farmhouse here or there every few miles, and it's paradise. Just you, the river, and hopefully a hatch of flies on it. And there's nothing better. I've had some of my nicest evenings on it. You could actually sit there for hours on a summer's evening, just looking at fish rising. There's nothing nicer, actually. Just somewhere. There's actually, if you're ever over, I'll take you and show you. There's even there's a weir in a certain part of it. There's no houses near this. There's a weir and there's a graveyard. And I often said to myself, we'd love to be buried there. The graveyard is probably 200 yards off the river, in the middle of nowhere. A house at the graveyard, it's just a paradise, honestly, paradise, and I love it. It's probably the nicest place that I've ever had to fish in my life. Like, the fishing is so good in it, and nobody fishes it. You kind of have it all to yourself, but you wouldn't see a footprint. To me, that's nice. And over the years, I've learned different laneways to go down through meeting farmers who don't even fish. And if you catch it, if the fishing is good, take a fish home and drop it off on the doorstep on the way home, and you're always welcome back. Little laneways where there's, you have no access, only those laneways. And you learn that they're there over the years. Nobody else would know that. And sometimes you can drive in and park right on the edge of the river. It's just laneways, the farmer access lanes for fields, farmers. That's how I learned all that river. You'd nearly have it to yourself. But again, if the fishing is good, keep a fish, drop it on his doorstep on the way home, and you'll always be welcome back. You'd be welcome if you didn't drop it anyway, but
yeah,
that to me is home from home. Nothing nicer.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I did making it. To celebrate this 100th episode, I have some great prizes for my patrons from people who have supported the podcast from the start and has kindly donated these prizes. I'd like to thank Charles Jardine, Simon Kidd of Snowby, Alan Rees, Stephen Belcher from the Gilly Kettle Company, Russell Owen and Gareth Dixon from Clywedog, and Jamie Miller from Garmfruit Fly Fishery. I will be adding the description to all the prizes in the notes to accompany this podcast. So if you're not yet a Patreon and want to enter with a chance of winning a prize, sign up by clicking patreon.com/Casting with Kerry Jones or visit my website castingwithkerryjones.com. And tight lines for the rest of the season, and don't strike too soon.